Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Colby. I think you have heard one song from all the Deer Hunter acts except for Act 2. So, here is one from it. We're going to be looking at The Lake and the River from the Deer Hunter Act 2, which I think it's interesting. Played I played bingo with their album so far, and I've only missed this one. So let's dive into it and complete the collection. The Lake and the River. Oh yeah, Bells and Guero is a fantastic way to start a track. Oh, we got some shakers too. Tambourine. I'm loving the auxiliary percussion on this already. Oh, it's like a vamping piano in the back. Oh, the bass is chimed in. There's a ton of layers, and that's what I expect from them. I know I'm missing some. I'm trying to find everything. The production is a bit rougher than I expect from them. Probably because this is their second album, I think. It's interesting to hear how their melody lines evolve. Primarily in the vocals. Still showcases a lot of post-hardcore sounds that I really haven't heard Act 4 onward, although I've only heard a couple songs from each album too, so... Love the bass, man. Really nice walking bass lines. Great tone. Presence. I think this is only the second track I've heard from them with Harshes, the other one being off of Act 3. It certainly bears a lot more of the post-hardcore elements than some of their newer stuff, which feels like it's moved towards the art rock element. And that's not to say we don't have art rock ideas in here already. Just the foundation is very post-hardcore, primarily driven through the vocals too. Yeah, a really nice flowy 5 right here. think the bass is really what helps drives this, but the 4 on the floor cymbals doesn't really emphasize the 5 either, which helps to feel it in the 10, which is symmetrical.
His leaves were bold extremities with great control. Wasted alone.
That piano line is what the bass was doing, but drastically simplified, only hitting the key notes on it. But this is core, and they copied. Oh man, that was slick. Yeah, a really nice 5 against 4 polyrhythm there. I can't believe it's almost over, man. This does not feel like we've been listening to this for 6 minutes already. Little fermata there to drag out the misery. I like how it is simultaneously looser thanks to those ba-boom, 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 those little leading eighth notes, but it's so heavy on the downbeat too. It is a very loose kind of weight. The vocals sliding into that note, there's a strong looseness here. Bass work. It's funny because the bass almost gave it like a folky thing going on there for a second. What is going on here? We have 3 bars of 4. And then something that throws it off. I'm not sure.
Trying to find the trouble with the trouble I found. Begging my God to make the wheels go round. Eat so much, but I never get full.
I love all the slides and dips. So good. That goes right into the next track, too. That was smooth. Did you hear that? That whole ending, I could honestly do a full analysis for by itself. I mean, the multi-directional slides, right? So the choir, they would sing their lines and hold out the last note and then either slide down or slide up or sometimes kind of have a dip into a rise. Um, and so we have this linear movement, and it's not stepwise, it's smooth. We go from this note to, a half step up or whatever, but we hit all the microtones between. That idea of sliding, of smoothly moving between one note and another, is something we can consistently hear in both of the acoustic guitars off to the hard left and hard right. But the cool thing is that they're going in different directions at different times. I couldn't find a pattern to when we would get a slide in the chord progression, or when one would go and the other wouldn't. If we were going up or down, unlike the vocals, which I think followed a very standard four phrase idea. I think it was 8 bars total, so 2 bars per sentence, I think. So an 8 bar phrase, pretty typical stuff. And they alternated up and down on their slide, and it was always at the end of the 2 bars. I couldn't find that sort of pattern anywhere in the guitar work. It just sort of, sometimes you would hear a rise and sometimes you'd hear a fall, and sometimes it'd be on opposite sides. Sometimes they'd go relatively close to each other, where you get this sort of mixed movement where we have a rise and in the middle of it we begin a fall, and then maybe as that falling is coming out, we're actually at the end of a 2 bar phrase and our vocals are rising up now, and we get this sort of piecemeal melody movement concept going. I don't know, it was just gorgeously written, and I'd love to listen to it again with I don't know, another couple of listens, particularly with the intent of finding the pattern here, just because I think it's phenomenal. There's also the choir work here. The vocal harmonies sound gorgeous, especially when the higher female vocal comes in on the final note. She's not always there across the sentence. If she is, maybe she's tucked away pitch wise, just kind of sitting in a more comfortable area, not standing out. But occasionally they'll hit the final syllable, and then, like, one beat later, she'll just pop out on top of everything, and it's this crystal clear note that just, it brings everything together. It's like I didn't think anything was missing, but now that I've heard this one note here, after we already had that full chord for a beat, I don't want it removed. It's such an integral part to understanding the feeling they're going for here, and I love that. It feels so complete, and then you realize there's actually a piece missing the whole time, and you get it, and you're like, yes, now this is complete. It just feels so good. Um, and so, like, all of this movement, the layering, the vocal work, it all sounds fantastic. You kind of wonder where it's going. And then the drums come in on the second time around, and you're like, okay, we're going to repeat this whole ordeal with some percussion. Okay. It comes up though, and I'm looking. I'm like, we got 30 seconds. Are they going to try to cram in another entire run of this? I don't think we have time to do this whole thing a third time. The vocals dip out though, and we get some strings, cello, I think specifically, but they're in reverse. Or are they? I don't know. There's something odd about the way they're being played, and as far as I heard it, they recorded these notes, just, play the note, play a whole note or half note or something, and then you just reverse it in your workstation. And we get a series of these rising and falling ideas. And then the accelerando. You start getting faster and faster and faster. And those drums that were just kind of giving us this heavy handed beat in the background start to pick up a bit of a syncopation. Almost a chugga 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 chugga. This heavy emphasis with a quicker, shorter note on the back end that leads back into a heavily emphasized hit. And that's when you notice that more instruments are coming in, taking on the full sound of a train. This is very reminiscent of, why did I just blank out on his name? Eric Whitacre, Movement 1 for Ghost Train, utilizing an orchestra to create the sounds of a very haunting train coming into station and barreling out with a supernatural force and power. No field recordings, no recorded anything. All of it is live, traditional instruments in an orchestra, and it sounds, if you close your eyes, I mean, it's a train. It is phenomenal. I've had the opportunity to perform all three movements, I think. But the first one is always just it's gonna hold a special spot in my heart. It is just a beautiful work. And very reminiscent of this, utilizing real instruments, nothing extra to create this feeling of a train coming in. And the thing is it feels so effortless and it comes out of nowhere. Like, nowhere in this track do they really utilize instrumentation to create a scene. The song itself does feel very thematic, or let me take that back, cinematic, especially at like the 7 minute mark when we had a car pull up and there was some ambient sounds and then doors opening and closing. They definitely go in towards a storytelling direction, but it's all done outside of the band. And for them to take this and say, you thought you knew what was going on here, we're going to pull that rug out from under you, though. We're going to recreate the next scene and another vehicle coming onto the set with the instruments. And just, yes, 100%. The entire novelty of this is phenomenal. The direction and misdirection, the setting up of expectations, and then undercutting them. Everything in this final 3 minutes is a microcosm of excellence as far as narrative storytelling goes, and doing things that are both theoretically exceptionally solid and beautiful, and working outside those bounds and doing things more experimental with the sound of music, such as using field recording or sounds from outside of the band, and using the band to showcase something that happens within a scene. It's just so good. Like I said, I can go on for an entire video on just what's going on in the ending, but I've got to talk about the rest of this. Just know that I was a little skeptical at the 7 minute mark when the song decided to basically stop and go in a very different direction, and I'm completely sold on it having finished the track out. As much as I did enjoy the first 7 minutes of this track, the final three are what I'm going to remember from it 100%. Just absolutely phenomenal. I say this often. Art is subjective and it is made by humans. So the subjectivity also comes from the fact that the creation of the art is by a flawed creator. There's no such thing as perfect art. Um, and so there comes the subjectivity. Do the flaws, work for you as a listener? Do they work against you as a listener? That's going to change for everyone. There's no such thing as a perfect work, but I mean, that final 3 minutes might. It's not going to change my entire philosophy of it, but it is challenging it. I have nothing negative to say about it at all. It is just. It is very well done. Uh, Dang. The rest of the track. I enjoyed it. This is more of what I would want from the Deer Hunter. While I enjoy their art pop, art rock aesthetic and ideas seen on Acts 4 and 5, and the one track I think I've heard from Anti, um, I think that covers everything after Act 3. Regardless, I've listened to a lot of their stuff though in their later works. And I enjoy that art rock theatric style they're going for. There's certainly a lot of stuff that works for me. But the very first song I was introduced to them on came from Act 3 and was jazzy post hardcore, complete with a full harsh jazz section, which sounded phenomenal. And there were three-way harmonies and just a bunch of the stuff I love in the rock sphere. And everything after it was good, but underwhelming because I expected something different. It took some time to realize that that track was sort of an outlier based on everything else. But this is very cool because this supports that maybe they started out with a stronger post hardcore foundation and slowly moved away from it to better suit the music. And it's even possible that they may look back on some of these earlier albums and have a sense, maybe not a strong predominant sense, but have a little, a little notion at the back of their head. The post-hardcore held it back, right? I don't know if that's necessarily how they feel about it. I might have a more concrete opinion about things after I listen to all 5 acts. But at least given the limited exposure I've had to their music, they definitely seem to be drifting further and further away from that and going in a more purely musical, theatric style of embracing a lot of musical sounds rather than having this core foundation that everything gets tacked onto. It sets some of these earlier songs apart as feeling rock plus rather than artsy or an experimental as a core element. And a lot of that comes from the guitar work and the vocals and the drumming. These give it the rock center, and I'd say most specifically the vocals are the thing that I think really cement that post-hardcore sound. It's the chords around it. In most of the instrumental sections, we have a ton of layers, lots of instruments, really beautiful work all over. It's not really difficult to see how Casey went from doing this stuff with Deer Hunter into his solo Renaissance work. There is definitely a very strong Renaissance inspiration here with the layering and the evocative atmospheres. Really already sort of has that foundation going on here outside of the rock instrumentation. But then every time he puts his vocals on top of it, all I hear is a an emo or a post-hardcore band. You can tell where his vocal influences came from. The composition side might have been more classical, but anytime he had to sing, there was crutches he leaned on, and those crutches seemed to be earlier post-hardcore stuff. It's in his inflection, it's in his melody lines, it's in what notes he chooses to emphasize on top of the chords. The chords don't really feel rock, but the melody transforms them into it. It's really interesting to hear a section and you're like, wow, this is really gorgeous. This is classical esque. And then you start singing, you're like, well, how did that become rock so quickly? And yeah, it's the way that he puts melodies on top of things, but the melodies specifically in the vocals. You listen to the guitar melodies, piano takes melody. We get a really strong bass line that maybe gets elevated into a melody at times. You don't pick any of this up. A lot of that Renaissance layering comes through in the way that things get built up and that melodies sit on top of chords. It really is when the vocals come in. And I don't mean to shed so much of a light on it. I'm definitely not throwing shade or anything. It's part of the growth, right? I think this was their second album. I don't know if they had anything before Act One, um, but you can see how the band has grown over time. And most bands' first album is honestly not going to be groundbreaking. It's going to be, what are my influences? What am I trying to mimic? What am I replicating? What kind of guitar riffs have I been practicing from other bands that have certainly influenced my guitar riffs or my drumming or my vocals? This is just a natural part of a band's evolution. So again, not throwing shade at it, I just think it's really interesting to hear how much of a post-hardcore influence I can feel here that I don't really feel later on, and I really think a lot of it comes down to the rock instrumentation, how the drums play, what the guitar riffs are, and very specifically, what the vocal melodies are. Now, aside from that post-hardcore element, which I didn't even bring up the harsh vocals, but certainly the harsh vocals bring in that post-hardcore sound real heavy. We also just want to focus again on the way that layers happen, specifically looking at the introduction of this song. We had the guero, we had the shaker, we had the piano at a time. The bass came in. There were bells. I don't remember what kind of bells off the top of my head. Um, but it was beautiful to hear the stacking of this. It was a condensed slow burn. It only took like 40 seconds or so to get everything layered up. We were getting them like two at a time, real quick, every 4 bars or so. It just felt like it was coming on real quick. I couldn't even keep up with it. I mentioned at one point that there's a lot going on here. I'm trying to pick it all out, but it's incredibly dense. But I love that despite 8, 9, 10 instruments going on at one time, everything is clearly heard and understood. Everything's complementary, both melodically and harmonically. There is no point in here that really leans into heavy dissonance. Maybe a little note here to add some spice, but certainly not on keynotes. Everything was very melodious, um, and working together for a positive effect, or amplifying the positive element. Let me put it that way. Just really gorgeously written. And this same type of layering is prevalent throughout the entire track up until the ending, which of course ditched the layering for a simplified group vocal approach. Really going for a simplicity there that amplifies the unification of whatever group came out of this car, I assume. I don't know the story. Um, But like up until that point though, almost every section is just gorgeously layered. Everything is complementary. There's an attention to what things are doing and when. Nobody's stepping on anybody's toes. It is just phenomenal. And these are a lot of the same elements that he brings into his Renaissance writing later on as well, on his solo Renaissance album. So like I said, I see so much clarity of understanding how the Deer Hunter evolved over time, but also how Casey grew as a composer, and seeing so many of the seeds planted here that would flourish into just phenomenal stuff later on. It's really impressive. A couple of notes. The production here is a bit odd. Anytime that we have layers, I felt like they were done really well. Layers of acoustic instruments I felt were layered really well. Anytime that we had anything electric, anytime that the vocals came in, there was a compression added to everything that created a bit of haziness, and I feel the song felt a bit more claustrophobic and smaller than it should have been. I kept bumping up the volume and it never quite felt full enough, even past the point of being comfortable loud wise. It always felt quite a bit smaller than I think they were aiming for, and that's very common in. When did this come out? I think is a good question too. Because post-hardcore overall does tend to have a fuzzier, more compressed production to it, but I'm also comparing it to post-hardcore of the late 2000s and early 2010s, which is particularly when I began to listen to, the Indigo Child. I forgot about that album. But this would have been in, the Color Spectrum. I forgot about that one too. 2007. So yeah, the production is on par with their contemporaries in the post-hardcore field. And it's a complaint I have of a lot of albums around that time with similar sounds, disregarding the entire art rock theatric style going on here. Um, it's something I'm used to. but I do think I would love to hear remasters that allow for a fuller sound sphere, especially for something like this where we have the larger orchestral instrumentation. And I do feel that it is hindered just a bit because of that. The bass work in here was phenomenal, though. The presence, the tone, I probably could have used a little bit more honing of the sound itself. It felt a bit muddy, but I could clearly hear what notes were played, what the rhythms were. Just wasn't as pronounced as I would have wanted. But the bass lines themselves were phenomenal. I loved that they were loud enough in the mix to have heard that, because I feel like the bass drives a lot of this forward in a very jazzy manner, which is interesting because that brings musical theater, Renaissance orchestral work, rock slash post hardcore, and jazz all into a single track where none of them really dominate the sound aside from the occasional melodies that bring about the post hardcore and just kind of override everything else going on. It really is phenomenal, everything that's put on display here, and that it ends up feeling as cohesive and unified as it does. I wouldn't really say there's too many sections in here that feel like there's a clash of ideas despite so many cooks in the kitchen. It's just done so expertly well, and again the ending just wow. I'm going to take a second to read some lyrics and we're going to wrap this up. All right, reading these lyrics, there's so many details I completely forgot to bring up. This song has so many great moments in it. One I just want to bring up real quick. It says bridge 1. The lyrics are left, right, left, right, left, right, very militaristic. I wonder if that was the section that had the heavy-handed jazzy idea going on with this, like an allusion to swung eighths, while still having this very rigid downbeat attack. If so, I think that works very well at selling what they're trying to do there. The ending is described as the oracles on the Delphi Express. They're the ones singing the big choir section. Are the oracles like the what are they called in Greek drama? The chorus, the choir. Anyways, the narration in a lot of Greek musicals are a choir. They sing to the audience instead of a single person narrating, like you would expect nowadays. Is that who the oracles are here? I don't know. That would certainly explain the massive change of musical and uh, sonic ideas going on there, the simplification of it all, the focus on the larger vocal width, having the full choir there. It's just, there's so many little things, and I completely forgot about the transitions. That section that was in 5/4, and then when we went to the next section, we went to 4/4, but we used some sort of polyrhythmic idea of keeping the 5/4 bass line, the three main notes of it, what was 1, 4, and 5, giving it to the piano in our 4/4 section, allowing us to feel like a natural transition of it. It was just so well done. I wonder how many times I missed something like that elsewhere in the track because I was focusing on an instrument that wasn't providing foreshadowing or tying together ideas. And there's also the concept of motif. There were sections that we heard at the beginning of the song that were picked up later on in different instruments or different keys. And there's just, again, there's so much going on. The composition here is so strong. On the topic of lyrics, there is a lot of narration and story going on. I don't get most of it, but it does come across very play like, and we are following our main character, I suppose, the hunter themselves. Um, but it seems that his mother recently died, and he's trying to figure out his place in the world, and having always dreamt of leaving the woods, I think, where he lives, he's decided to leave it all and take a train to the city. And there are two bridges and an outro, a chorus, four verses. Like, there's a lot of dialogue going on here that I assume is not, well, not dialogue, monologue. It is our hunter telling us what they're feeling, what they want to do. Um, it's the I Want song. If you're familiar with musical vocabulary, it's typically something that you give to your protagonist, and it describes what's going to make them happy and gives the listener an idea of what the story is going to be about, what our protagonist's goals are, and an understanding of some of the hurdles they might overcome and what kind of character arc they're going to be exploring um, going forward throughout the story. It's different to the I Am story, which describes who someone is, typically given to a villain or an antagonist, so that you can understand how they are different from our protagonist, who we will spend more time with, and you'll begin to understand who they are through their actions more so than narrative exposition. Um, but yeah, that's exactly what this is. This is an I Want song. All right, those are my thoughts. Some of them, at least. If I had a second listen on this, I'd have an entire other 40 minutes to talk about. My thoughts on the deer hunter, the lake, and the river. Let me know your thoughts, comments, perspectives, opinions, anything else down in the comment section. Let me know what you thought of this one. Above the comments in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree, which takes you here. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord channel, a link to the Discord server, and a bunch of other stuff. You can see there's like, I don't know, like 10 links there, 11 links. Go check it out. Ton of stuff. Go have fun. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, or ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of, what are we doing again? Huge payoffs. I was like, we just did a porcupine tree. What did we learn from that? Huge payoffs. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening.